Hello, welcome back to the Desk Corner, welcome to a new video, or if you're new to my channel, welcome to my channel. Over the past few months, I've gotten a few comments, and it might have even been before that, I've gotten a few comments asking me about best supplies for beginners or drawing supplies for people just getting into art. I thought it would be fun to make a video about that so I could talk about supplies that you can get that aren't going to cost a ton of money and just things that will really help you out if you're new to drawing. Keep in mind I'm a pencil artist, so most of these are going to be pencil related. We're not going to be talking about like paint or anything like that. But if you're getting into drawing again or for the first time and you want to have some recommendations for supplies and tools and things like that, then this video will be for you. Of course, it's not going to be extensive and you're also not going to need like every single thing on this list, but hopefully I mentioned a couple things that you haven't thought of before or that are new to you. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump straight into the video. Let's go ahead and start by talking about paper. So if you're newer to drawing and art, I assume that you might be reaching for a sketchbook more often than just buying individual sheets or pads of paper or drawing paper that might be more expensive. And I used a sketchbook for my first few years kind of drawing and getting into art because they just came with so many sheets of paper and I could just keep my art all in one place and it wasn't stressful, it was very convenient. So when you buy a sketchbook, it doesn't really have to be expensive. Like this Canson mixed media one that I recently got is, I think it was pretty cheap. I got it from Michael's. It was only a few dollars. It wasn't very expensive at all. But as you can see, the paper is actually pretty high quality because this is a watercolor pencil drawing that I did, and I even used Fineliner to outline it. And the paper could handle it pretty well, and same with this horse that I drew as well. So as you can see, these are all watercolor. So obviously if a paper is able to handle ink and water-soluble medium, then it's going to be able to handle normal colored pencil or graphite or charcoal or anything like that. It has a little bit of a tooth to it as well. So it doesn't really matter how much it costs, just look at the paper. If you, for example, find a sketchbook and the paper looks like this, let me show you guys. So this is one of my older sketchbooks. The paper is super thin and it does say thin fine tooth surface, which is something you probably want to avoid if you're going to be doing like colored pieces or you're going to actually shade your work, because as you can see it's going to show through on the back and the paper damages really easily. Like this is already causing a crinkle just because I did light shading in graphite for that drawing. So this is not the best. I wouldn't really recommend something that's really thin or fine tooth like this. It can work, but your work is probably not going to be preserved as well because the paper is going to get kind of damaged and it might even tear or bend a little bit. So I would avoid anything like this and look for something that's either mixed media or just a bit thicker of a paper that could handle a little bit more in terms of layering and shading. Like this first sketchbook that I got, and this is just totally random, I have no idea what brand this even is. There's Leonardo DiCaprio apparently. This sketchbook was thick enough to be able to like decently handle the pressure I was using with my graphite pencils. I also recommend having some excess paper, like a little pad of paper. It doesn't even have to be an art brand or anything, but just something you can use to create like swatches on if you want to swatch out colors or see how colors will blend together, or if you just want to practice something before you actually apply it to a drawing that you're doing. It's really useful to just have some excess paper in a little notepad. This smaller sketchbook is useful if you're planning on traveling with it or bringing it around different places, but of course you can also have a bigger one as well if you're just going to be drawing from home. So it really is up to you. As far as graphite pencils go, I have two sets. I have the Staedtler Mars Lumograph and I also have the Faber Castell 9000 set. Both of these sets I would recommend. I haven't tried many other sets though, because I feel like with graphite, once you find a set that you like, you don't really need to have a ton of different pencil sets. So that being said, whatever you can find locally of course, and if you're able to, then you can buy whichever set you would like to online depending on where you live. But if you don't want to buy a full like 12 set of graphite pencils, you can always just buy 6 or something like that. I really don't think you need every single pencil in the range. I've talked about these pencils quite extensively in other videos though, so I'm not going to talk about them too much more in this video. For sketching and outlines, I often just like to use a basic mechanical pencil because you don't have to worry about sharpening and you can get all those tiny details in with a mechanical pencil. So I really don't think there's any magical like sketching pencil or anything that you need for sketching that's very fancy. You can just use a regular mechanical pencil and be totally fine if you want to, and that's pretty much what I do. It's also very like portable as well. So another question I get asked fairly often is about colored pencils and what colored pencil set is best to start with for beginners. And this is a really tough question because colored pencil sets and lines all act very differently. There's a lot of differences between them, and also colored pencil is an expensive medium, so it's going to cost a lot more than something simple like graphite or charcoal. For me, the first colored pencil set I got was the Prismacolors. I got the set of 60 or 70, and then I built it up from there, but I started out with around 60 to 70 colors, and it was a little overwhelming for me because I was new to color mediums. I hadn't really practiced with painting or anything before either, so I didn't know what I was doing when it comes to color. Another thing is that the Prismacolors are waxy, and so let me show you an example here. This is a ridiculously sharp long point of a pencil here, but this pencil is sharpened to a really fine point, but because the Prismas are so soft and waxy, it isn't going to take long for this point to dull out. And so you have to sharpen them more frequently if you're going for a higher level of detail, which is something that for me personally, I don't really like as a trait in colored pencils. And so I ended up buying the Polychromos a few years later, and I liked them more. Now I feel like this is why it's important to try pencils open stock if possible before you buy a whole set. And if that's not possible, I would start out with a smaller set because the smaller sets with less colors are not as expensive. So for example, if you're into portraits, you can buy the Prismacolor portrait set, and that gives you a good range of portrait colors to work with, and you don't have to spend as much because you're not buying an entire set of colors. With the Polychromos, I started off with something like a 24 set and built it up from there. So I started off with a lot less colors than I did with the Prismacolor set, and I ended up liking these pencils more. So that's why I recommend you try pencils open stock before you buy a whole set of them. If they're more expensive, like Prismas or Polychromos, I've heard that the prices of Prismas has gone down. I don't really know if that's true. When I bought them, it was like 2014 and they were still pretty expensive, but the Polychromos were more expensive. Depending on where you live, that's for me in the US, Polychromos are more expensive than Prismacolor, but if you don't live in the US, I don't think Prismacolor would even really be worth it because the price must be really high for them. If you're looking for something more affordable and much cheaper, on Amazon there are a ton of colored pencil sets that are cheaper. Obviously not light fast or anything like that, most likely, but they are blendable and you are able to create really nice drawings and things like that with them, so they're not going to be like your school style colored pencils that you would get like Crazy Art or something like that. They're going to be high enough quality that you can blend with them. They're just not going to probably last over time, but if you're just practicing and you're new to art, those I think would be fine. But what I honestly recommend doing if you're looking to invest in a set of pencils that you're going to build upon, I would honestly recommend buying a smaller set of colors, whatever it is that you can afford, and then buying open stock from there, because when we're talking about the brands like Prismacolor and Polychromos and a few other brands, you're able to buy them open stock on numerous art websites online and sometimes even at local art stores. And the benefit of this is when you run out of one color, you can replace that one color. You can also pick which exact colors you want if you don't need a full range of colors. Yes, these brands are going to be more expensive, but you can invest in your collection over time, and at least if you don't end up liking colored pencil, you haven't wasted very much money getting a smaller set at the beginning. Also, getting a smaller set means you can practice mixing your colors a little bit more and getting to know your colors, and that way you can kind of play around with color theory if you haven't really played around with it before. If you're new to color mediums, then it's really useful to get a smaller set and practice with that. Those are just my recommendations to keep the cost low and if you haven't tried colored pencils before, but of course if you don't really have a budget, you can buy a bigger set to begin with if you would like to. I really recommend you guys try some pencils from different sets open stock before you buy the whole set though. I think that that would be so helpful to figure out which feel of pencil you like better, because these Polychromos are harder core and they just will feel different than the Prismacolor, and that goes for like all different brands of pencil as well. While we're still on the subject of colored pencils, I'd like to recommend a specific pencil to you guys, no matter what colored pencil set you're thinking about getting, and that is the Faber Castell Polychromos Black Pencil. As you can see, mine is a little stub at this point because I use it so much. And what I really like about this black pencil is it just stays so sharp and you can add in all those tiny little details. It is just great to work with. I use it all the time and I'm obsessed with it basically. So if you're looking for a good black pencil to, you know, add in details and things like that, then I recommend the Faber Castell black pencil, the Polychromos black. It is just amazing and I love it. Oh no, I can't say the same about the Polychromos white. It's not really the best white that there is. The Prismacolor white and the Caran d'Ache Luminance white are a lot better. I've made a few videos about using solvent with colored pencil, and if you're interested in that, I would recommend picking up one of these Gamsol 100% pure odorless mineral spirits to use as a solvent. I think that this is fairly easy to use. It doesn't cause me to have a headache or my eyes to burn too much. Of course, with any solvent, you're going to need to ventilate, but this one is not terrible. I have not had any issues using it. It's really cheap and you can find it at Hobby Lobby or any craft store really, or online as well. And if you get a bottle about this size, it will last you a while too. I've had this one for a few years. So if you are interested in using solvent to blend your colored pencils, this is the one that I've tried and I haven't had any issues with. If you're extra sensitive to solvents, you might want to look more into that though and see if you can find something that is maybe scented like the Zest-It pencil blend, which I haven't gotten my hands on here in the US, but I've heard that one is very citrusy and not as hard on the eyes perhaps. So sharpeners are kind of where things get a little bit tricky here because I've had a lot of issues with sharpeners in the past and finding sharpeners. I found this one on Amazon. I have a few of them actually, and it is just one of those rotational ones where you can adjust. So for example, if I don't want the point of my pencil to be too long, I can set it to 1 and I'll get a shorter point. Let's use this pencil for example. So this way I'm able to get a pretty sharp point on the pencil without the point being like way too long. Like I have sharpeners that will do this where you'll get a really long point, but it'll be kind of like too long and it wastes the pencil. Like the pencil starts to shrink very quickly. So that's why I recommend this pencil sharpener for colored pencils, and it also works good for graphite pencils, charcoal pencils, as long as it's a round barrel. Also, the Derwent pencils are too big to fit in here, as well as the Caran d'Ache Luminance pencils, so you can't use all pencils with this, but Prismacolor and Polychromos fit in here, as well as my General's charcoal pencils and my Cretacolor charcoal pencils. If you're interested in trying out charcoal pencils, they're really easy to get your hands on. General's is really great. Cretacolor is really great. I've already talked about these in other videos, so I'm not going to go deep into it because it's getting a little old now. I keep repeating myself. But again, another really cheap medium that will add a lot to your drawings and you can get without really having to spend that much money, and it's really easy to find these as well. So I definitely recommend these. Another great thing that you can buy if you're interested in drawing and playing around with drawing are Fineliners. This is great if you have a sketchbook that you're just playing around in and you like to be a little stylistic, or if you're creating something that is maybe animated or something in a particular style that you would like to fine line. I recommend picking up Fineliners. The Faber Castell are great, and also the Microns are great, and you can kind of buy these open stock if you'd like, but I also just have a set that I got from probably Hobby Lobby or Michael's. A white gel pen is also great. I have this Uniball Signo white gel pen. It's just like a jelly pen basically. I used to have just the normal jelly roll pens. Let me grab one for you. So the jelly roll pens look like this. You've probably seen them before, but I upgraded to this one and I really like it. But if you'd like to add white highlights to your work, white gel pens are great for that. Of course, they are not archival. You're able to scratch them off, but we're talking about practicing and things for beginners in this video, so I don't think that is a huge concern for many. Eraser wise, you want to avoid, of course, pink erasers. You don't want any colored residue from a colored eraser coming off on your paper. You definitely want to stick with a white eraser, and it's best to try to find one that doesn't give off a ton of flakes or residue. So this is the Pentel one that I use. It's really great. I have a whole pack of them, so I'll have a lifetime supply and never run out. Of course, it's also really easy to find yourself a kneaded eraser, which is great for picking up excess graphite, things like that. and lightly erasing and molding to whatever shape that you want. So if you don't already have one of these, I would definitely pick one up. They're very useful, of course, and I also use these, which are not necessary but very helpful. These Tombow Mono Zero erasers. One is very, very fine point and it's round. One is more like a rectangle. But these are great for erasing smaller areas that would be hard to get into with something like this. I wish I'd known about these before. You can find them pretty easily online on Amazon or anywhere, but I really wish I'd known about them before because I had such a hard time trying to erase small areas in my work, and I'd end up erasing more than I meant to erase. In my opinion, these are worth it. Oh, and they're refillable too if you're worried about running out. They're refillable, you can buy refills for them, so no worries about that. By the way, we're at the point where we're talking about supplies I assume everybody already knows about, because I didn't want to do this at the beginning since a lot of people have already talked about these, and a lot of people probably already have these, but I thought it was worth it to mention them. We've also got blending stumps and tortillions, and these are just smaller versions of blending stumps basically. But these are great for shading. They get messy very quickly. I kind of just use them now for charcoal, mostly because they blend charcoal out really great. But this one is great for finer details as well. So usually drawing sets already come with these, but I thought they're worth a mention in case anybody out there doesn't have one of these yet. Another thing that you might not have thought of yet, but it's actually pretty useful, is getting one of these clear rulers, and mine has a bunch of little measurements on it. But what's really great about this is you can use it to trim down paper into different sizes if you have bigger paper and you trim them down for different art pieces, or if you sketch, well, of course you sketch if you draw, but if you're sketching and you'd like to measure out distances and things like that, it's great to have a clear eraser, I can't even speak. It's great to have a clear ruler like this that you can use to really measure out different spaces and areas, and I just think it's something useful to have. Mine happens to be bendy, but I don't think it matters all that much. Another thing that's really useful is using parchment paper, or I guess you could say tracing paper. I just bought a tracing paper pad by Strathmore, but you can get this, I'm sure, a lot of places. And what you can do with this is you can use it to protect your hand while drawing, or protect your paper from your hand, your oils and things like that on your hand getting onto your drawing. So this is great for that. You just place it under your hand as you're drawing, and it's safe to put it on top of the paper because since it's waxy like this, it's not going to pick up your charcoal or your graphite or whatever as much, and it's not going to smudge your drawings. I also kind of like to place this over a pastel or a graphite or charcoal drawing that hasn't been fixed with fixative or anything, because it will help protect it again from getting smudged. So this is pretty useful, and if you feel like your hand is always smudging your drawings, I think it's worth it to just get some parchment paper and just use that. Okay, you guys, I think that concludes everything I wanted to talk about in this video. Again, it's not extensive, but also you don't need all of these supplies, of course, to get started with drawing. I just wanted to mention a lot of different useful things for different people who might be interested in different things. Also, I've talked about a lot of these supplies before, so if you're new here, check out my other videos and you'll probably find me talking more in detail about some of the mediums I've mentioned in today's video. If you're new to drawing though and you don't have any resources or means of obtaining more supplies, don't worry about it, just work with what you have and do your best. When I first started, I didn't have a lot of these materials that I talked about in today's video. I just wanted to mention them because they're things I wish I knew about, a lot of them. But of course, I pretty much just started out with a basic drawing set that had some blending stumps, a kneaded eraser, and graphite pencils, and then a tiny little like metal sharpener. So don't think that you need all of these things to start out with drawing, because you don't, of course, and these are just suggestions that could help you out and make things easier for you. And yeah, I think that's all for today's video, and thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought of this, and if there's anything I left out that you'd like to mention, that's great for you to leave that in the comments below. I'd really appreciate that. But yeah, you guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!